In the last video, we saw a sneak peek of the first person shooter I'm building in Unreal. I have changed a few things since I recorded that, but today we'll be doing some more. The first thing we need to do is plan out what we're going to do today. So we load up good old trusty old Trello and we make a new list. At the moment the gunplay feels a little bit, so of course we'll need to fix that. At the moment we only have semi-automatic firing and there's no recoil. So, BAM! Automatic firing. Boom! Recoil! And last but not least, muzzle flash to make our weapons look nice. Now, there's obviously a lot more than just those three things that go into making a weapon feel and look good, but we'll be covering those in a future video. Alright, let's start with making our weapon automatic. So, as you can see, our weapon is currently semi-automatic. Well, I mean, you can't see it because you can't see me clicking my mouse, but you'll just have to take my word for it, I am not holding down the mouse button. So what's happening in our blueprint right now is it's firing the bullet directly after it receives the event from pressing the mouse button. If we want to make the weapon automatic, then we're going to need to do some processing before we fire the bullet. So, instead of firing the bullet when we get the event from the mouse click, we'll make a custom event and we'll fire this ourselves when we're ready to fire the bullet. So we'll move the mouse click event out of the way so we can do our processing around it, and then we'll get on to creating our first variable. So we head on over to our weapon base class and we declare the fire rate variable. As you can probably tell, this defines how quickly our weapon can shoot. Not just in automatic mode, but in semi-automatic mode it will also limit how quickly we can press the mouse button and shoot. For our test weapon, we'll set this value to 0.1 so that we can shoot 10 rounds per second or 600 rounds per minute. Now, going back into our character blueprint, we can start setting up the logic to enable automatic firing. So first thing we need to do is we need to declare a variable for weapon cooldown so we can keep track of how long it's been since the weapon has last fired. Then, every tick, we decrease it by delta seconds so that every second it decreases by 1. Then, we check if it is less than or equal to 0. Now that we have that, we'll set it aside and move on with the other part of our algorithm. So, obviously, we need a way to find out if our firing button is being held down. So we set up this variable isFiring, which will be used to keep track of when the button is held down. Using our input event from before, we can set this to true or false depending on if we press or release the fire button. Pretty simple. Now, back to what we were doing before. We'll set up a couple of branches just to make sure that we are in the correct weapon cooldown range and also that we have the fire button held down. If both of these things are true, we can call our fire event and shoot our gun. One last thing we need to do before we can test this is when we fire our gun, we need to set the weapon cooldown back to the fire rate so that we can't just spam infinitely. Right, so we should be all set up now. Let's jump in the game and see if it works. It's working very well. Earlier I mentioned that we could also use this solution for semi-automatic weapons. To get that working, we'll need to set up a little bit more logic, but it's not much. First, we set up a variable that lets us decide whether the weapon should be automatic or semi-automatic. For our test weapon, we'll just leave it unticked for now so that we can test out the semi-automatic feature. Going back to earlier, we just need to add a little bit more code to what we did. Is this really code? It's sort of more like nodes or whatever the heck they are. We need to add a little bit more. What I did is I added a few branches just to check whether the weapon is automatic or not. If it is automatic, we'll just do what we did before. If it's not automatic, we're going to need to do something else. Rearranging this a little bit and then skipping half of it, we can make it so the semi-automatic firing does its own thing while also reusing the code from the automatic weapon. Alright, so now that all that's hooked up, I'll just set the test weapon's fire rate to 0.5 and then we'll give it a shot. Heh, shot. As you can see, I'm pressing the mouse button as quickly as I can, but the weapon is only firing every 0.5 seconds like we said. Now just to double check we haven't broken automatic, we'll set it back to automatic, change the fire rate back to 0.1 and we'll test it again. Nice. Now that automatic firing is done, we need to move on to recoil. If you made it this far through the video, congratulations, welcome to the halfway point. Seeing as you made it this far, you're probably fairly interested in the project. I think this is a perfect time to shamelessly plug my Discord. Full of friendly community members and many channels for you to talk about basically anything you want. We have memes, food, self-promotion. We even have our own in-house Minecraft server open to the public. So, for all of your Discord needs, be sure to join Poncho Discord today. Since our weapon system is inspired by Counter-Strike's weapon system, let's have a look at Counter-Strike and see how it's done. Basically, all weapons have a set recoil pattern. This allows high skill players to be able to learn the pattern and then more effectively shoot their opponents. The recoil pattern is exactly the same every single time except for random spread, which can't be controlled. But with practice, controlling the base recoil pattern is a possibility. I'm okay at this, I guess. Just for demonstration purposes, I think this serves the point. I thought about how I was going to do this for some time, and then the solution I came up with was to plot an array of recoil in a pattern and then sample from that when I need it. This took a lot, and I mean a lot longer to implement than I thought it would. Anyway, let's have a look at the final result. As you can see, firing the weapon now jolts the camera upwards towards where the bullet is going, and the camera returns to its resting position after you stop firing. Now it's possible to compensate for recoil by pulling your mouse downwards, improving your aim. I'm still not very good at it though. I'm not going to go into how I did this because it's quite complicated and it would make for its own video. If you'd like to see how I did it, then let me know and I might actually make a video about it in the future. Sweet! Now that recoil's done, we'll move on to the last part of this video, making the gun look good with a little bit of muzzle flash. Let's get rid of that stupid looking laser and make some actual bullet effects, shall we? Since I've already got the Paragon assets imported, I'll be using those for the muzzle flash and impact. Getting this set up was as simple as spawning the effect where I want it to be, and spawning the impact where the bullet hits. Most of getting this working and looking good was just messing around with locations, rotations and scales until it looked reasonably good. Alright, let's have a look at the end result. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching. If you liked it, you know what to do.
Remember to dislike and subscribe.